Senators spent last week in our home states. We got to hear firsthand updates about the real issues facing real families that we all represent. I was especially glad to return to Western Kentucky to keep working on our recovery from the catastrophic tornadoes that hammered our state in mid-December. Kentuckians are tough, they're resilient, but many are still reeling from the impact of these storms. They've lost homes, businesses, even loved ones. I spent last week meeting with local leaders, small business owners, and Kentuckians in the hardest hit areas. We talked about our work here in Washington and the help they can expect to receive from us. Kentuckians in the affected areas have been grateful for the quick and efficient way that FEMA has begun distributing recovery aid. We know recovery will be a very long process, but my office and I will be standing with our people every step of the way. And the entire state is expected to improve our roads, bridges, railways, and broadband, thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure deal that Congress struck last year. But like working people across America, Kentuckians also have serious concerns about significant headwinds. Kentucky families are feeling the pain of the worst inflation in 40 years. Our country has been hammered by 7% inflation over just the past year. Employers are trying hard to keep up, even as they face inflation across all their expenses. Businesses across our region have significantly upped their spending on wages and benefits, but many workers have gotten raises, but actually it's only on paper because the historic inflation on the Democrats' watch has more than canceled the average increase in wages. Inflation is turning pay raises into pay cuts. This is just one of the many significant problems we confront. After a year of record-setting bloodshed in America's streets, violent crime is still forcing too many to live in fear. The historic humanitarian and security crisis that unfolded at our southern border on Democrats' watch has actually gotten only worse. The Biden administration's war on affordable and reliable American energy has put consumers in a bind. And a half a world away in multiple regions, growing storm clouds are darkening the international stage with major implications for America and for our allies. Across the Middle East, from proxy terrorist attacks to nuclear and missile development, Iran keeps reminding us it has no intention of playing by the rules. In Eastern Europe, Vladimir Putin himself is spelling out the reality of Russia's threat to the international order, one armored vehicle at a time. I'm encouraged that President Biden finally appears inclined to reinforce Eastern European treaty allies with U.S. forces, and those deployments must take place sooner rather than later. And other NATO allies should join us in defending our eastern flank allies. Likewise, American and allied efforts to support Ukraine's ability to defend itself must occur not at the speed of bureaucracy, but at the speed of relevance. Unfortunately, Washington Democrats have spent months focused on one distraction after another from these pressing challenges. Months before Russia began massing forces for an invasion of Ukraine, our colleagues on the Armed Services Committee produced a bipartisan defense authorization bill that would reassert our commitments to our allies and partners in Eastern Europe, as well as Asia, and help our own forces stay on the cutting edge of competition with China and Russia. But instead of moving this legislation forward to prompt passage, the Democratic leader left the NDAA in limbo until almost the last minute. In the meantime, Senate Democrats spent months trying to assemble a massive, reckless taxing and spending spree packed with policies that nobody was asking for outside of the radical left. Our citizens were fighting for their economic lives, trying to fight off gas prices, grocery prices, car prices, housing prices. And here Democrats were claiming the way out of inflation was to spend trillions on windmills windmills, and welfare. And of course, a multi-trillion-dollar debt explosion wasn't even the most radical thing Democrats had recently tried to ram through. Earlier this month, the vast majority of Senate Democrats tried to break this chamber's most fundamental rule for the sake of appointing themselves the entire country's Board of Elections on steroids. Well, I hope our friends across the aisle can spend 2022 recommitting themselves to the actual problems that families are facing on their watch. This razor-thin Senate majority owes the American people at least that much. Now, on a final matter, last week Justice Stephen Breyer announced his plans to retire from the Supreme Court at the conclusion of this term. Justice Breyer deserves our country's hearty congratulations. By this summer, he will have dedicated more than 4 decades of service to the federal judiciary, including 28 years on our highest court. During this time, the justice has won respect and admiration from across the legal profession. One does not have to agree with the substance of Justice Breyer's legal philosophy or the conclusions he has reached in many cases to appreciate the service he has rendered to the court and to our country. He is universally regarded as a careful and committed jurist. He is a top-shelf legal expert and intellectual heavyweight. In fact, Justice Breyer has published prolifically, even beyond his caseload. Over the decades, the justice has spent many hundreds of published pages transparently laying out his legal philosophy and thinking through scholarly questions in public view. Most of all, I admire Justice Breyer's staunch defense of the institution of the Supreme Court itself in the face of increasingly reckless rhetoric from loud voices on the political left who'd like to consider themselves intellectually aligned with Justice Breyer. The justice proved that, in fact, they are not. He has been a loud and consistent opponent of disastrous ideas such as modern Democrats' partisan court-packing proposals that would destroy public trust and deal a permanent blow to the rule of law. So my warm best wishes are with Justice Breyer, his wife Joanna, and the Breyer family as the justice concludes his term and his truly remarkable tenure. Naturally, the country's focus now turns to the next chapter for the court, which President Biden and the Senate will author together. For now, Madam President, I'll simply note a basic fact. President Biden was elected on the specific promise to govern from the middle, steward our governing institutions, and unite a divided country. Underscoring that point, the American people handed President Biden a dead-even Senate, 50-50. I suggest that President Biden bear this in mind as he considers whom to nominate to our highest court. The American people deserve a nominee who has demonstrated reverence for the written text of our laws and our great Constitution.